Imagine for a moment a world where fire is more than just warmth. It is memory, it is a promise, it is a living thread connecting two ancient peoples, humans and dragons, in a bond so old its origins are whispered in legends. This is the world of Alara, a young woman kneeling in her village herb garden, her fingers gently brushing the luminous leaves of an ember globe plant. This unique flower blooms only under the gentle light of the village's central hearth flame, a flame that has burned for generations, a constant, comforting presence that is the very heart of her home. Her task is one of quiet duty, a simple act of care, but her gaze is never truly on the petals before her. It is pulled again and again toward the distant, mist-shrouded mountain peaks. That is where the stories say the great Aerie of the dragons lies, a place of majesty and mystery that no villager has dared approach for longer than anyone can remember. There is a feeling in the air around her, a quiet, persistent hum that seems to resonate deep in her bones. It is a sensation of something forgotten, a connection severed by time, waiting patiently to be remembered. It sets the stage for a journey that will challenge everything she knows about her home, her people, and the hidden heritage that flows in her own blood. And as she tends her garden, a subtle change occurs, a change that will shatter the quiet rhythm of her life. The light of the great hearth flame, always so steady and strong, flickers violently. For one terrifying moment, it dims, guttering like a candle in a strong wind, its light fading to a feeble, sickly glow before weakly recovering. That small, personal ritual of care is about to be interrupted by a call to a much larger duty, a call that will lead her far from the safety of the familiar and into the legendary domain of the guardians of the eternal flame. We are about to step into a cozy story from the age of dragons, a tale of rediscovery, courage, and the quiet power of a single person to mend a broken world. We'd love to know where you're joining us from today and what time it is where you are, whether it's the middle of the afternoon or late into a starlit evening. Let us know in the comments below, and let's begin this journey together into the mountains, toward the mist, and into the heart of an ancient mystery waiting to be solved. A sudden, sharp gasp rippled through the village square. Elara's head snapped up from her plants, her heart lurching into her throat. The great hearth flame, the unwavering heart of their community, was convulsing. Its steady, golden light twisted and shrank, plunging the square into a deepening twilight for one heart-stopping moment. A chilling silence fell, broken only by the flame's own desperate, sputtering sound as it fought to survive. Just when it seemed the light would be utterly consumed by the growing shadows, it rallied, flaring back to life with a weak, guttering flicker. It was no longer the proud, confident blaze of moments before, but a sickly, trembling imitation of itself. Before the stunned villagers could even murmur their fear, Elder Kalin was at the Hearthstone rim, his usual calm demeanor shattered. The deep lines on his face, usually etched with gentle wisdom, were now carved with a stark, profound worry that sent a fresh wave of cold dread through Elara. He stared into the feeble flame, as if looking into the face of a dying friend, his hands trembling slightly at his sides. The entire village seemed to hold its breath, the air thick with a sudden, low-level anxiety that was almost audible. The flame was not just light and warmth, it was their protector, the source of their crop's vitality, the very symbol of their enduring spirit. Its faltering was an unthinkable omen. Kalin's searching gaze swept across the frightened crowd and settled firmly on Elara. He moved to her side, his voice low and urgent, meant for her ears alone. "Elara," he said, "this is a disturbance of the deepest magic. It is a subtle ailment, not a brute force attack. Sending a warrior would be like using an axe to perform heart song." "But you," he continued, his eyes softening with a desperate hope, "you understand the whispers of plants and the language of the earth. Your gentle nature and your knowledge of natural lore make you uniquely suited for this delicate task. You must discover the source of this sickness." The weight of his words, of the entire village silent, fearful expectation, settled on Elara's shoulders like a physical burden. Here was the conflict laid bare, the terrifying choice between the known safety of her home and the unknown, whispered dangers of the wild mountains. The elder's unspoken fear was a palpable force, amplifying her own apprehension. Yet, looking from his worried face to the struggling flame, and then to the distant peaks that had always called to her, she felt a strange sense of clarity. Her personal curiosity was now inextricably linked to the communal survival. The stability of their entire way of life was at stake. With a deep, steadying breath that belied the frantic beating of her heart, Elara nodded. She accepted the responsibility, her voice quiet but firm. "I will go." That simple decision, to step beyond the familiar boundaries of her life, felt like the most monumental step she had ever taken. The journey ahead was shrouded in mystery, but the alternative, to do nothing and watch the heart of her home fade into nothingness, was unthinkable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, anxious shadows, Elara began her preparations, knowing that with the dawn, everything would change. She gathered a simple pack with dried food, a water skin, and her trusted herb pouch. Most importantly, she carefully scooped a portion of glowing hearth ash into a small leather pouch. Its faint, warm pulse, a tangible reminder of what she was fighting for. At first light, with the village still wrapped in a nervous quiet, Elara stood at the edge of the settlement. She took one last look at the fragile flame and the sleeping homes, then turned her face toward the whispering mountains. Her path led away from safety into the vast unknown, a journey of immense stakes that began with a single, determined step into the awaiting forest. The ancient forest rose before her like a living wall, its canopy so thick it seemed to drink the morning light. Stepping beneath its boughs was like entering another world, one where the familiar rules of her village no longer seemed to apply. The air itself changed, growing cooler and carrying the rich, loamy scent of centuries of fallen leaves and deep, damp earth. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and exhilaration. She was truly alone now, with only the faint, warm pulse of the hearth ash in her pouch to connect her to home. Holding the small leather bag before her, she watched its soft glow ebb and flow, a tiny, breathing star in the gathering gloom. It was her sole compass in this vast, unknowable place. Strange, melodic sounds began to weave through the silence, notes without a source that seemed to drift between the trees like mist. They were not the calls of any bird or beast she knew, but something older, more elemental. Along with the haunting music came shifting lights, patches of soft blue and gold, that danced just at the edge of her vision, flickering and fading if she tried to look at them directly. The forest felt deeply, profoundly awake, and she had the uncanny sensation of being watched by 1,000 unseen, curious eyes. Yet the attention did not feel menacing. It felt attentive, as if the woods themselves were assessing her intent, judging the weight of the heart she carried. Her apprehension was a cold knot in her stomach, a primal urge to turn back to the safety of the known. This was the true conflict she faced, an internal battle against the whispers of fear that told her every strange sound was a threat, every shifting shadow a predator. She forced herself to breathe deeply, to unclench her fists and listen not with terror, but with the same openness she used when tending her plants. She had to learn to trust this environment, to believe that its magic was not a trap, but a language she needed to learn. It was a test of spirit, not strength. It was then that she noticed it, a subtle path winding between the great, mossy trunks. It was not a trail made by human feet or animal hooves, but a ribbon of luminescent moss that glowed with a soft, internal green light. It pulsed gently, almost in time with the hearth ash in her hand. This was no accident, no trick of the light. It was an invitation, a guide. Her mind raced with the implications. To follow it would mean leaving behind any known paths, plunging even deeper into the heart of the enchanted forest, committing herself completely to the unknown. She made her decision in a single, breathless moment. She would follow. This was not a journey that could be won by force or stubborn will. The stakes had just been raised, transforming her quest from a simple mission of investigation into a test of harmony and attunement. Success would require wisdom, patience, and a willingness to engage with the world's mysteries on their own terms. Trusting her instincts over her fear, she stepped onto the path of light. The moment her foot touched the glowing moss, a wave of calm washed over her, and the strange, melodic sounds seemed to swell in a faint chorus of approval. She was being welcomed, not led astray. The luminous path guided her unerringly through the deepening woods, around treacherous sinkholes hidden by ferns and past thickets that hummed with a wild, untamed energy she knew to avoid. It led her to a small, hidden clearing where the dense trees parted to form a natural chapel. Sunlight, thin and golden, filtered down to illuminate the centerpiece of this secret space, an ancient stone archway so choked with ivy and vines it was nearly swallowed by the forest. But even beneath the greenery, she could see the faint, elegant carvings of dragons and flames intertwined, and she could feel it, a soft, warm energy that pulsed from the stone in a slow, steady rhythm, a silent heartbeat that seemed to be waiting just for her. Her fingers, though trembling slightly, moved with the gentle precision of a gardener as she began to clear the thick tapestry of ivy from the ancient archway. Each vine seemed to cling with a will of its own, as if protecting a sacred secret, but as she carefully pulled them away, the intricate carvings beneath were slowly unveiled, telling a story in stone. Dragons with scales like flowing water coiled around tongues of eternal flame, their forms so masterfully intertwined, it was impossible to tell where the beast ended and the fire began. It was a symbol of perfect unity, a harmony of power and spirit that made her breath catch in her throat. As the final vine fell away, the small pouch of hearth ash at her belt suddenly flared, its warm, familiar glow intensifying into a brilliant, pulsing light that beat in time with a new, deep hum emanating from the stone itself. The archway was not just an artifact, it was alive with a dormant energy that recognized the essence of her home, the very spark she was sworn to protect. The resonance between the magical stone and the humble hearth ash was a physical force, a thrumming vibration she could feel in her bones. It was a call, a question posed by the ancient magic. Trusting the instinct that had guided her this far, Elara slowly raised her hand and pressed her palm flat against the central carving, a grand dragon's eye carved from a single, smooth gemstone. The moment her skin touched the cool stone, the hum erupted into a deep, resonant chord that shook the very air. The space within the archway, which had once framed only more forest, shimmered and dissolved. In its place was not a doorway to the other side of the clearing, but a rippling, translucent curtain of pure light. It shimmered with hints of gold and blue, and through its wavering surface, she could just make out distorted shapes of a place that was decidedly not the Whispering Woods. This was a portal, a magical passage that defied the very miles between here and the distant peaks. The consequences of this discovery were staggering. This gateway offered a direct path, a miraculous shortcut that would bypass weeks of dangerous travel, treacherous climbs, and unknown perils on the mountain slopes. The journey that had seemed an impossible test of endurance was now transformed into a single, monumental choice. But the conflict was no longer about physical endurance. It had become a profound test of faith. Could she trust this magic? Was this shimmering veil a gift or a glamour? A true path or an elegant trap designed to ensnare the hopeful? To step through was to surrender all control, to place her fate entirely in the hands of an ancient power she did not understand. The stakes had escalated dramatically, shifting her challenge from the tangible realm of rock and root to the mysterious and unpredictable realm of pure magic. Her heart raced, a frantic counterpoint to the portal's steady, inviting hum. She looked back the way she had come, toward the safety of the known world, then again into the shimmering, unknown light. This was the decision that would define her. Turning back meant certainty, but also failure. Stepping forward meant embracing the very essence of the mystery she sought to solve. It required a courage deeper than facing a physical threat, a courage built on trust and hope. Drawing a steadying breath, she closed her eyes for a brief moment, focusing on the warmth of the hearth ash, on the image of her village's flickering flame, on the weary sadness in Elder Kalin's eyes. Her purpose was greater than her fear. With that resolution firm in her heart, Elara opened her eyes, squared her shoulders, and stepped through the luminous veil. The sensation was unlike anything she could have imagined. It was not like moving through space, but like having space move through her, a dizzying rush of light and energy that was over in a single, breathtaking heartbeat. The world dissolved and reassembled itself around her in an instant. The damp, earthy scent of the forest was gone, replaced by a wave of dry, warm air, carrying the rich aroma of sun-baked stone and the sweet, pungent scent of wild thyme. The dim, green-lit gloom vanished, and she found herself blinking in the brilliant, clear light of a vast, open cavern high in the mountains. She stood not in some dark, subterranean tunnel, but in a magnificent chamber whose roof had long ago fallen away, opening it to the wide, blue sky and the warm embrace of the sun. The world solidified around her with a gentle finality, the last traces of the portal's energy fading from her skin like a warm, receding tide. For a long moment, Elara could only stand and stare, her mind utterly incapable of processing the reality before her. She had stepped from a shadowy, enchanted forest into a cathedral of light and stone. The cavern was immense, its ceiling a vast, open wound in the mountain that allowed the bright sun to pour directly into the heart of the rock, illuminating everything with a brilliant, almost divine clarity. Lush, vibrant plant life thrived in this concentrated sunlight, with flowering vines cascading down the warm stone walls and strange, broad-leafed ferns carpeting the ground in a tapestry of emerald and gold. The air itself was a miracle, warm and dry and fragrant, with the scent of sun-baked stone, sweet pollen, and the distinctive, comforting aroma of wild thyme. And at the very center of this sun-drenched sanctuary lay a wide, perfectly still pool of water, so clear it seemed to be a piece of the sky itself, fallen to earth and cradled by the stone. It was a place of such profound peace and breathtaking beauty that Elara felt her mission, her fear, and even the weight of her village's hopes momentarily lift from her shoulders, replaced by a simple, overwhelming awe. This was a secret heart of the world, a hidden gem, but that perfect serenity was fractured a second later by a sound that was entirely out of place, a faint, desperate scrabbling, and a high, pained whimper that echoed softly against the stone. Her gaze, which had been sweeping the grandeur of the cavern, snapped downward, drawn to the source of the distress. There, partially hidden by a large, fallen rock near the water's edge, was a creature that stole the breath from her lungs all over again. It was a dragonette, tiny and perfect, no larger than one of the barn cats that prowled her village square. Its scales were a mesmerizing tapestry of iridescent color, shifting from sapphire blue to deep amethyst with every slight movement, and they caught the sunlight in 1,000 brilliant points of light. But its beauty was marred by its obvious distress. One of its delicate, translucent wings was pinned cruelly beneath the heavy, jagged rock, and it was struggling with all its might to free itself, its small claws scratching uselessly against the stone floor. Each frantic movement was met with a fresh jolt of pain, a soft cry that spoke of exhaustion and building terror. This was no fearsome beast of legend, but a young, helpless life in immediate danger. Every lesson, every story, every warning about the dangers of the wild and the power of dragons evaporated from Elara's mind in that instant. There was no calculation, no weighing of risks or consideration of the magical implications. There was only a deep, instinctual surge of compassion that overrode everything else. The woman who tenderly nurtured every seedling in her garden could not stand by and watch this small, magnificent creature suffer. Her own awe was instantly channeled into action. She rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside the trapped dragonette, her movements swift but deliberate, her voice a soft, soothing murmur as she approached. "Do not be frightened, little one," she whispered, her tone as gentle as if she were calming a spooked animal. "I am here to help you. Let me help." The conflict was immediate and physical, a straightforward test of strength against the unyielding weight of the stone. She braced her feet against the cavern floor, her muscles straining as she tried to find purchase on the rock's rough surface. It was heavier than it looked, stubbornly lodged in place. A part of her mind, the part that was still a practical villager, noted that a misplaced effort could shift the rock and cause even more injury. She had to be smart, not just strong. She repositioned herself, searching for a better angle, and found a smaller stone nearby that could serve as a lever. She wedged it carefully under the main rock's edge, focusing all her strength into one precise, upward lift. It was a simple, grueling effort, a world away from the mystical trials she might have expected, but it felt more important than any ritual. This was a test of character, not magic. With a final, grating groan of protest, the rock shifted just enough for the pinned wing to slip free. The Dragonette immediately scrambled back, but it did not flee. It simply stood there, trembling, its injured wing held at an awkward, painful angle. Elara did not reach for it again. Instead, she slowly opened her herb pouch, the familiar, earthy scents of dried blossoms and crushed leaves, bringing her a sense of calm purpose. She selected a few specific plants, combining them with a few drops of water from her flask in her palm, mashing them into a soothing poultice with her thumb. "May I?" she asked softly, holding out her hand, the green paste resting on her palm. The little creature hesitated for only a second before limping forward and nudging her hand with its nose, a gesture of pure trust. She carefully applied the poultice to the bruised and strained membrane of its wing, her touch as light as a feather. The Dragonette let out a soft, shuddering sigh, a sound of profound relief, and then did something that brought tears to Elara's eyes. It gently nuzzled her hand, not once, but twice, a clear and heartfelt thank you. In that moment, the stakes of her entire journey transformed. This was no longer just about a flickering flame in her village square. Her success or failure now directly impacted this small, trusting life she had chosen to aid. A bond had been forged, simple and pure and deeply personal. The Dragonette, its pain clearly eased, suddenly became urgently attentive. It turned its head toward a shadowy archway leading into a deeper part of the cavern, its body tense. It let out a series of sharp, insistent chirps, looking back at Elara with an intensity that was impossible to ignore. The message was clear. Their connection was just beginning, and the little creature needed to show her something. It was time to move deeper into the mystery. The little Dragonette, now freed and soothed, seemed to study Elara with an unnerving intelligence. Its eyes, like polished gemstones, held a light that was more than a reflection of the sun. It chirped softly, a sound that was both a question and an answer, and then carefully flexed its injured wing. The poultice had done its work, and though the movement was still tentative, it was clearly no longer in agony. Elara smiled, a wave of relief washing over her. "You are much tougher than you look," she murmured, "but you need a name, little friend. I cannot keep calling you Dragonette." As if in response, the creature shook itself, and its iridescent scales caught the light, casting tiny, shimmering rainbows on the cavern walls. "Lumi," Elara said, the name arriving in her mind as naturally as a breath. "For your light," Lumi chirped again, this time with a distinct note of approval, and bobbed its head. Then, with a purposeful air that belied its small size, it turned and began to limp toward the shadowy archway at the far end of the sunlit cavern. It paused, looked back at Elara, and chirped insistently, clearly expecting her to follow. This was the moment of decision. Behind her was the shimmering portal, the path back to the familiar world of the forest. Ahead was the deep, unknown interior of the mountain, guided by a creature she had only just met. Yet, looking into Lumi's intelligent eyes, Elara felt no trace of fear, only a solid, unshakable certainty. Her mission was forward, and this small being was offering its help. She shouldered her pack and followed without a second thought. Their journey began through a network of tunnels that branched off from the main cavern. These were not rough, natural passages, but smooth-walled corridors that felt crafted, almost architectural, glowing with a soft, internal light from veins of crystal that ran through the rock like frozen lightning. Lumi moved with a newfound confidence, its limp easing with every step. It was an impeccable guide. When the path forked, it would stop, its head tilted as if listening to the very hum of the mountain, before choosing a direction with a confident chirp. At one point, Elara herself would have taken a wide, inviting tunnel that sloped gently downward, but Lumi planted itself firmly in her path, chirping a sharp warning. It gestured with its snout toward the floor of that tunnel, and only then did Elara notice the almost imperceptible shimmer in the air above it, a subtle distortion that hinted at a pocket of wild, unstable magic. A wrong step there could have led her astray for hours, or worse. She felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. This was a landscape where perception could be deceived, and trusting her own eyes alone would be a grave mistake. The tension of their travel was a quiet, constant companion. It was not the fear of a monstrous attacker, but the unease of navigating a realm where the rules were written in a language she did not yet understand. The very air seemed alive, thrumming with energies both gentle and volatile. In some stretches, the crystal light would pulse with a soothing, rhythmic glow, and the air would smell sweet, like rain on dry earth. In others, a low, discordant hum would vibrate through the soles of her boots, and the walls would gleam with a feverish, erratic light. Lumi was her compass in this magical wilderness. It would hurry her past sections where the ground felt treacherously soft, or pause to let a strange, swirling mist of energy dissipate before leading her on. Elara's role was to observe, to learn, and most importantly, to trust. She had placed her safety and the success of her village's hope entirely in the instincts of this small dragonette. This decision, made again with every step, was weaving a bond between them far stronger than any spoken agreement. She was no longer just a woman on a quest. She was a guardian, and Lumi was now under her protection as much as she was under its guidance. The stakes had become deeply personal, a twin burden of communal duty and newfound friendship. After what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, the character of the tunnels changed. The gentle glow of the crystals intensified, and a faint, melodic sound, like distant wind chimes, reached Elara's ears. Lumi's pace quickened, its chirps becoming excited. It scampered ahead, around a final bend in the passage, and disappeared from view for a heart-stopping moment. Elara hurried after it, and as she rounded the corner, the tunnel simply ended, opening onto a breathtaking vista that made her gasp aloud. They had emerged high on a ledge within an unimaginably vast cavern, so enormous its ceiling was lost in a soft, luminous haze. Below them lay the heart of the great Aerie. It was a city crafted not by human hands, but by time and magic. Crystalline spires, smooth and elegant, rose from the cavern floor like a forest of glittering trees. Waterfalls cascaded down distant walls, their mist catching the ambient light and creating perpetual rainbows. It was a scene of majestic, serene beauty, a testament to a civilization of grace and power. Yet, as Elara's awe settled, a profound unease crept in. The city was silent. There were no mighty roars echoing through the vast space, no great winged shapes soaring between the spires. The magnificent Aerie lay spread out before her, a masterpiece of a lost age, holding its breath in an unnatural and deeply unsettling stillness. The breathtaking silence of the Aerie pressed in on Elara, a physical weight as heavy as the mountain above them. It was a city of ghosts, a symphony hall waiting for a music that would not come. She saw them then, the great dragons, and her breath caught not in wonder, but in a pang of sorrow. They were arrayed throughout the vast cavern, resting on ledges and crystalline platforms, their forms the very stuff of legend. But the legends spoke of creatures clad in scales that shone like captured starlight, of eyes that burned with the heart of a forge, of an aura of warmth and immense power. What she saw were echoes of that glory. Their scales were clouded, like gems left too long in the dust, their magnificent horns and spines seeming brittle. The faint glow that emanated from them was the weak, guttering light of a candle fighting a draft, not the brilliant corona of a sun. Their movements, when they moved at all, were achingly slow, heavy with a fatigue that seemed to go straight to the bone. They noticed her, of course. Great, ancient heads turned, eyes the size of shields opening to regard the tiny human and her small glowing companion. But there was no roar of challenge, no blast of defensive fire. Their gazes held no malice, only a deep, unspeakable sadness, a weary recognition that felt infinitely older than she was. In that moment, the truth of her village's flickering flame shattered and reformed into a terrifying new reality. This was not a problem of a clogged flue or a damp wood pile. The hearth in her village was just a single leaf on a massive, dying tree. The sickness was here, at the very root. It was in the dragons themselves, the source of fire magic, the wellspring of the warmth and protection her people had taken for granted for generations, was fading from the world. The scale of the crisis was so vast, it felt like standing at the bottom of the ocean, crushed by the pressure of the water above. How could she possibly fix this? She was a village herb tender, armed with pouches of leaves and pastes, a heart full of stories, and a loyal dragonette. What poultice could she make for a creature larger than her entire house? What song could she sing to ease a sorrow centuries old? The conflict was no longer about navigating a magical forest or healing a single small injury. It was a confrontation with an existential decay that threatened everything. If the dragons faded completely, what would become of her village's flame? What would become of the magic that she now realized hummed through the very stones under her feet? The stakes had exploded from the survival of her community to the survival of an entire way of life, a balance of nature that stretched across the whole world. Terror told her to turn back, to flee this cavern of fading giants, and let their slow end be a mystery for the ages. But as she looked at Lumi, who pressed against her leg, its own small light seeming dimmer in the oppressive gloom, she knew she could not. Her village had sent her to find an answer, and an answer, however terrifying, was now before her. To leave would be to condemn them all. The decision was made not in a grand burst of courage, but in a quiet acceptance of duty. She would have to ask. Summoning every ounce of her will, Elara took a step forward, then another, her boots whispering on the smooth crystal floor. She walked through the silent assembly, a small figure moving among slumbering leviathans, her gaze fixed on the largest of them all, a dragon of such immense size and age that its scales were like plates of ancient, tarnished bronze. Its head rested on the cavern floor, its eyes closed. As she drew near, the great eye opened. It was not a fierce yellow or a fiery red, but a deep, molten gold, holding the weariness of 1,000 years. Elara froze, her heart hammering against her ribs. She expected a gout of flame, a rumble of displeasure. Instead, the ancient head stirred, lifting with a soft, grating sound of stone on stone. It lowered until that enormous eye was level with her, seeing her, truly seeing her, and then a voice spoke within her mind, a sound not heard with the ears but felt in the soul, a vibration as deep and resonant as the mountain's core. It held no anger, only a profound and gentle gravity. Little keeper of embers, it thought to her, its mental voice a slow, patient rumble. You have come a long way to find a truth your people allowed themselves to forget. The flame fails because the pact is broken, and it must be renewed, or all will turn to ash. The voice that echoed within Elara's mind was not a sound, but a feeling, a resonance that vibrated in her very bones. The ancient dragon, whose name was revealed to be Ignis, spoke of a time when the air itself thrummed with a different energy. He explained that the eternal flame was never a simple fire to be tended like a cook stove. It was a living current of magic, a brilliant, shimmering thread woven between the heart of dragonkind and the spirit of humanity. This was not a gift the dragons gave, nor a resource humans took. It was a covenant, a shared breath that gave warmth to the villages and vitality to the dragons in equal measure. For this delicate balance to be maintained, a bond of conscious intent was required. A human, chosen by their community for their empathy and pure heart, was to undertake a pilgrimage to the Aerie. This guardian's role was to stand before the source of the flame and perform a ritual, a ceremony of shared memory and rekindled hope that would weave the thread of connection tight once more. It was an act of remembrance, a promise that humanity had not forgotten its oldest friends. Centuries of peace, however, had slowly eroded this vital tradition. The journey stopped, the stories faded into myth, and then into forgotten whispers. The role of guardian became a hollow title from a children's fable, its true purpose lost. And as humanity forgot its part of the pact, the symbiotic magic began to wither. The flame in the village did not merely grow dim. The very essence of the dragons, so deeply tied to that shared energy, began to wane. Their glorious fires banked, their luminous scales dulled, their immense spirits grew heavy with a loneliness only a broken promise can bring. As Ignis shared this history, a profound shift occurred within Elara. She was not just a curious villager sent to investigate a flickering light. She was the first human in generations to hear this truth. She was, by the simple fact of her presence and her listening heart, the designated guardian. It was a title lost to time, and it now fell upon her shoulders with the weight of a mountain. A wave of pure, cold inadequacy washed over her. How could she possibly be the one to mend a tear in the fabric of the world? She was no mighty hero from the songs, no sorceress steeped in ancient lore. She was a tender of plants, a keeper of small, growing things. The sheer historic importance of the role felt like a suit of armor 10 sizes too big, threatening to crush her beneath its grandeur. Her village's survival depended on her, the very existence of these magnificent creatures. Now that she saw their profound sorrow, depended on her. The internal conflict was a silent scream in her mind, a chorus of every doubt and fear she had ever possessed. Yet, as she looked into the weary, ancient eyes of Ignis and felt the trusting press of Lumi against her leg, that screaming doubt found a counterpoint. A quiet, stubborn ember of resolve began to glow within her chest. She was her village's only hope. She was the only thread they had to cast across this vast, silent chasm of forgotten years. Swallowing hard, her voice little more than a whisper yet clear in the immense silence, she accepted the mantle. She would be the guardian. With her acceptance, the nature of her quest transformed entirely. It was no longer just about finding a cause. It was about performing a miracle. Ignis explained that the ritual required 3 sacred components, each a symbol of the bond and a key to its renewal. She would need to find a tears of the sun blossom, a flower of pure, condensed light that grows only in the most treacherous reaches of the mountain. She must earn a single scale from a dragon of each of the 3 primary flights, representing the united strength of dragonkind. And lastly, she must find a song from the heart of the guardian, not a melody sung with the voice, but a truth of the spirit given form. The first of these, the luminous blossom, waited for her in a place of stark and brutal beauty, a test of both her courage and her resilience. She would need to journey to the Sun-Scorched Canyons. The path Lumi led her on wound ever upward, leaving the cool, sun-drenched tranquility of the cavern behind and opening onto a landscape of stark, breathtaking severity. Before them lay the sun-scorched canyons, a labyrinth of towering rock faces carved by ancient rivers that had long since vanished. The air here was still and heavy, shimmering with a heat that felt solid, a palpable force pressing down from a sky bleached of all color. There was no gentle breeze, only the occasional hot, dry gust that kicked up plumes of orange-red dust. Every surface, from the colossal stone spires to the gravel underfoot, seemed to radiate the intense, accumulated warmth of 1,000 noons. This was not a place of life, but a forge of stone and light. Her tiny guide, Lumi, seemed undaunted by the harsh conditions. The Dragonette's iridescent scales glittered like scattered jewels under the relentless sun, and it moved with a sure-footed confidence, chirping softly to indicate the safest route through a field of treacherous, loose shale. Elara followed, her own village-made boots slipping occasionally on the unstable ground. She pulled the hood of her cloak up, but its rough woven fabric offered little respite from the punishing heat. Her throat was parched, and she took a careful, measured sip from her water skin, knowing this precious resource had to last. The climb was a brutal test of endurance. She navigated narrow ledges that dropped away into dizzying depths, her fingers finding purchase in cracks worn smooth by wind and time. Her muscles burned with a fierce ache she had never known, but with every difficult step, she drew upon the skills her life had given her. The strength she had built tending the steep village terraces, the balance learned from carrying water jars along uneven paths, the keen eye for reading weather signs in the clouds and the feel of the air, all of it became her armor and her tool. This was not a magical challenge, but a profoundly physical one, and her confidence grew not from a sudden burst of power, but from the quiet realization that her own 2 hands and her own resilient spirit were equal to the task. Lumi's urgent chirping pulled her focus upward. The Dragonette was pointing its snout toward the very peak of the highest canyon spire, a needle of rock that seemed to scratch the underbelly of the sky. And there, cradled in a small fissure at its apex, was a sight that made her breath catch. A single, perfect blossom clung to the stone. Its petals were not a solid color, but appeared woven from strands of pure, liquid sunlight, shimmering with a soft, internal radiance. This was the tears of the sun blossom, a thing of impossible beauty, surviving in a place of extreme hardship. But the sight of it also brought a jolt of pure urgency. The sun was nearing its zenith, and the still air was beginning to stir with a new, ominous energy. She could feel it, the subtle shift in pressure that her grandmother had taught her to recognize, the precursor to the daily sunstorm. These were not storms of rain, but of wind and scouring sand, violent outbursts born from the clash of superheated canyon air with cooler currents from the high mountains. To be caught on this exposed spire when it hit would be disastrous. A silent, desperate race against time began. Elara pushed her screaming muscles harder, climbing with a focused intensity that shut out everything but the next handhold, the next foothold. The rock was hot to the touch, almost burning. Lumi fluttered anxiously around her, a buzzing jewel of concern. The wind began to whip at her clothes, plucking at her cloak with impatient fingers. Grit stung her eyes and her exposed skin. She could hear the storm approaching, a low, building moan that echoed through the canyon corridors below. With one final, straining heave, she pulled herself onto the small, flat summit. The blossom was right before her, so fragile it seemed it might dissolve in the building gale. She didn't grab it. Instead, with hands that trembled from exhaustion and the force of the wind, she carefully worked her fingers into the stone around its roots, gently loosening the delicate structure until she could cradle the entire plant, roots and all, in her palm. Its light was not hot, but warm, a comforting pulse against her skin. The moment it was free, the sunstorm broke in full force. A wall of wind and sand roared across the peak, threatening to tear her from her precarious perch. Shielding the precious blossom against her chest with one hand, she clung to a rock outcrop with the other, squinting against the blinding, stinging assault. Lumi shrieked and dove toward a dark opening in the spire's side, a narrow fissure she hadn't noticed before. Scrambling, half-sliding, Elara followed the Dragonette into the welcome darkness, collapsing onto the cool, still floor of a small cave, just as the full fury of the storm screamed past the entrance. In the sudden quiet, broken only by the howl outside, she slowly uncurled her fingers. The tears of the sun blossom glowed softly in the dimness, its light a tiny, defiant sun in the shadows. She had succeeded. The first component was safe, but as her heart slowed its frantic pounding, her mind turned to the next trial. This fragile bloom of light had been a test of body and will. The next item on her list would require something entirely different. She would need to seek out the mysterious Emerald Flight in their mist-shrouded forests, a place where strength of arm meant nothing, and only a quiet heart and a respectful spirit would be heard. The air in the Emerald Glade was a palpable thing, thick with the scent of damp earth and living wood, a world away from the searing canyons. Sunlight, filtered through a dense canopy of leaves in 100 shades of green, fell in soft, dappled patterns on the mossy ground. It was a place of profound, watchful silence. No birds sang, no insects hummed. The only sound was the whisper of her own breath and the soft crush of moss beneath her boots. Lumi, who had been a bright, chattering presence, fell utterly still, its large eyes scanning the shadows between the colossal, ancient trees. This was not the weary silence of the great Aerie, but the quiet of a predator's ambush, or perhaps the deep, mindful quiet of a library, holding forgotten secrets. The dragons were here. Elara knew it with every fiber of her being, but they were waiting. Their presence felt as a pressure behind the veil of the forest itself. Then she saw the first flash, a flicker of light so subtle it could have been a trick of the shifting sunbeams. It came from the deep shadows near a gargantuan, silver-barked tree. Focusing her eyes, she saw the outline of a dragon, its scales the exact color of deep moss and shadow. As she watched, another pattern of light, a series of quick, staccato pulses, glimmered across its flank. A moment later, from another part of the glade, a different dragon responded with a slow, undulating wave of greenish light. This was their language, she realized, a silent conversation written in luminescence. To burst in and demand a scale, as one might demand a toll from a gatekeeper, felt suddenly brutish and foolish. Such an act would shatter this delicate communication and likely earn only hostility. The conflict here was not against a physical obstacle, but against her own ignorance. The challenge was to speak, not with her voice, but in a tongue she had never learned. Sinking slowly to the ground, she crossed her legs and placed her hands on her knees, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. She emptied her mind of the urgency of her quest, of the image of the flickering village flame, and simply opened her senses to the glade. She watched the light patterns, not as a confused outsider, but as a student trying to discern a rhythm, a grammar. Some patterns repeated. A quick double blink often seemed to be an acknowledgement. A slow, pulsing glow appeared to be a sign of calm. Reaching into her herb pouch, her fingers closed not around a leaf or root, but around a smooth, clear crystal she used for focusing sunlight to start small fires. Holding it up, she angled it to catch a beam of light. Tentatively, she tried to mimic the acknowledgement pattern, tapping her finger quickly twice against the crystal to make it flash. The forest remained silent, but the watching feeling intensified. She continued this patient, painstaking effort for what felt like hours. She would observe a simple pattern from one of the hidden dragons, and then try to replicate its essence with her humble tool. It was a clumsy translation, like a child learning its first words, but it was an attempt. She was not trying to deceive them or command them. She was trying to say, "I see you. I am trying to understand. I mean no harm." Lumi sat beside her, a warm, patient presence, occasionally emitting a soft chirp that seemed to blend with the forest's energy. The tension was a quiet, humming thing. Would they see her efforts as respectful inquiry or as meaningless mimicry? The stakes of this quiet diplomacy felt immense. If she failed here, all the physical endurance of the canyons would be for nothing. Her entire approach as guardian, built on empathy and connection, hinged on this moment of silent communication. Then, the largest of the emerald dragons, a creature whose form seemed woven from the very shadows and leaves of the glade, unfolded itself from its resting place and moved toward her. Its movement was utterly silent, a ripple of muscle and scale through the undergrowth. It stopped a few paces away, its great head lowered so that one immense, intelligent eye, glowing with a soft jade light, was level with her own. Elara held her breath, her heart pounding, but she did not look away. She met its gaze, her crystal held loosely in her lap. The dragon studied her for a long, timeless moment. Then, a complex, beautiful pattern blossomed across its chest and neck, a swirling design of light that spoke of deep forests, flowing water, and ancient, patient wisdom. It was a sentence, a story, and then, with a gesture of profound grace, the great beast shook its shoulders once. A single, perfect scale, the size of her palm, and shimmering with captured forest light, loosened and drifted down to land softly on the moss before her. It was not a prize taken, but a gift given, a gesture of trust earned through patience. As her fingers closed around the emerald scale, it was cool and smooth, and she felt a sudden, startling connection to the glade around her. It was as if she could feel the slow, deep pulse of life in the trees, the hidden pathways of small creatures, the quiet strength of the earth itself. The scale was not just an object, it was a key to understanding this place. Holding it, she felt a surge of confidence. Her gentle methods were not a weakness, they were her greatest strength. But as this new connection hummed in her hand, her thoughts turned to the final trial. The Emerald Flight valued quiet understanding. The next and final component would demand something else entirely. It would require her to face the majestic and formidable Sapphire Flight in their windswept cliffside domains, where strength of heart would be tested against the raw power of the sky. The sheer face of the sapphire cliffs rose before her like a wall of living blue stone, its surface catching the afternoon sun and fracturing it into 1,000 dazzling shards of light. The air here was different, thin and sharp, carrying the distant cry of eagles and the constant, low thrum of wind rushing through deep ravines. Lumi, usually so brave, pressed itself against her leg, a soft whimper escaping its throat. This was not a place of hidden conversations or quiet wisdom. This was a domain of raw, exposed power, and the dragons that called it home embodied that spirit completely. Perched on ledges and outcroppings were the Sapphire Flight, their scales the color of a deep ocean under a cloudless sky, their postures regal and their gazes intensely direct. They watched her approach, not with hostility, but with the unwavering assessment of seasoned warriors evaluating a new recruit. At the highest point, on a needle-like spire of rock that seemed to defy gravity, stood the Elder. He was larger than the others, his horns curled like ancient, polished rams, and his presence was a physical weight that pressed down on her. He did not wait for her to speak or attempt to communicate. Instead, his voice echoed not as sound in the air, but as a resonance deep within her bones. The challenge was simple, its terms as clear and hard as the stone beneath her feet. She was to climb to the summit of the spire and stand there, unaided, while he summoned the true voice of the mountain. This was not a test of climbing skill, though the ascent was perilous enough with handholds slick with ice and drops that plunged into misty nothingness. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of pure terror. Every instinct screamed at her to retreat, to find shelter, to curl into a ball and protect herself from the coming fury. This was the final physical component, the last barrier between her and the ritual. To fail here, after the searing heat of the canyons and the silent diplomacy of the glade, would render every previous effort, every scrap of courage, utterly meaningless. The stakes could not be higher. With numbed fingers and a will forged in the village hearth, she began to climb. The wind, already strong, seemed to pluck at her, trying to peel her from the rock face. Lumi remained below, watching with wide, anxious eyes, unable to follow. Reaching the flat, windswept top of the spire felt like arriving at the edge of the world. She stood, her legs trembling, and faced the elder dragon. He dipped his great head once, a gesture of respect for her arrival, and then he opened his jaws. But no fire emerged. Instead, he unleashed the storm. It was a gale of such concentrated force that it stole the breath from her lungs, a hurricane contained to the space of that small peak. It was not just wind, it was sound, a deafening roar that was the mountain itself given voice, a symphony of crushing pressure and shrieking force that threatened to shatter her mind. It whipped her hair across her face, tore at her clothes, and pushed her relentlessly toward the precipice. The conflict was entirely within her. Her body was a puppet of fear, every muscle tense to flee from the overwhelming power. To stand firm required a different kind of strength, one that had nothing to do with physical might. She could not fight this force, she could only endure it. Closing her eyes against the blinding rush, she turned her focus inward. She reached past the fear, past the screaming of her nerves, and found her anchor. She pictured the warm glow of the village hearth, not as it had flickered in distress, but as it had burned for her entire life, a constant symbol of community and care. She saw the faces of her neighbors, the children playing in the square, the elder Kalin's wise and worried eyes. She felt the memory of Lumi nuzzling her hand in the sunlit cavern, a gesture of pure trust. This was not about proving her power to the dragon. It was about demonstrating the depth of what she fought for. Her love for her community, her bond with her friend, her commitment to the dragon's survival. These were the roots she sank into the heart of the mountain itself. The storm raged around her, but within her, a core of absolute stillness grew. She did not resist the wind, she became part of it, a fixed point around which the chaos could whirl, unwavering and resolute. As suddenly as it began, the storm ceased. The silence that followed was louder than the roar had been, ringing in her ears. She opened her eyes, her body still thrumming with the residual energy. The sapphire elder was looking at her, his immense head tilted. In his ancient, diamond-bright eyes, she saw no judgment, only a deep and profound understanding. He had not been testing her physical endurance, but the quality of her spirit. He had needed to see if her heart had the resilience to anchor the ritual, to withstand the immense energies of renewal. Her quiet stand upon that peak had given him his answer. With a slow, deliberate movement that spoke of immense respect, he nodded his approval. Then, with a faint, almost musical scraping sound, a single, perfect sapphire scale, edged in silver and cool to the touch, loosened from his chest and drifted down through the still air, landing gently at her feet like a fallen piece of the sky. She knelt, her fingers closing around the third and final scale. It hummed with a different energy than the others, a vibration of pure, unwavering will and clarity of purpose. She had them all now, the delicate blossom from the sun's heart, the scale of emerald understanding, and the scale of sapphire resolve. The physical trials were over. But as she looked at the three luminous objects in her palm, a new and more terrifying understanding dawned. These were just the instruments. The true magic, the power that would breathe life back into the flame, had to come from a source far more elusive and deep. It had to come from a song, woven not from notes, but from the very essence of her own being. The most difficult part of her journey now lay not before her in the world, but within the silent, uncharted depths of her own heart. Holding the 3 scales and the delicate blossom felt like cradling the entire weight of the world in her trembling hands. The physical journey was complete, the trials won, but Elara knew with a sinking certainty that the most difficult challenge still lay ahead. It was a challenge with no path to follow, no enemy to face, and no guide to lead the way. She had to find a song that did not exist in any language she knew, a melody born not of sound, but of pure feeling. Ignis directed her to a small, secluded grotto on the edge of the Aerie, a place where a small spring trickled down a mossy wall into a still pool. Here, away from the expectant gaze of the ancient dragons, she was to search within herself. The silence in the grotto was profound, broken only by the gentle drip of water, a sound that seemed to mock the frantic racing of her own heart. Sitting on a smooth, sun-warmed stone, she closed her eyes and tried to do as instructed. She reached for the memories, grasping at them like fragments of a dream. She pictured the village hearth, its comforting glow, the way its light danced on the faces of her friends during story time. She remembered the scent of baking bread and the sound of laughter in the square. She thought of her journey, the terrifying beauty of the Sun-Scorched Canyons, the silent, luminous language of the Emerald Flight, the overwhelming tempest of will on the sapphire cliffs. Each memory was vivid and powerful, yet they remained just that, isolated pictures and sensations. They refused to coalesce into the single, pure essence the ritual demanded. The pressure built like a physical weight on her chest. The fate of her home, the survival of these magnificent creatures, the balance of magic itself, all of it rested on her ability to conjure something from nothing. A cold wave of doubt washed over her. Who was she, a simple herb tender, to believe she could command the power to rekindle an eternal flame? The expectation was a cage, and her fear was the lock. She was trying too hard, forcing it, and with every strained effort, the true song retreated further from her reach, leaving behind only the empty echo of her own inadequacy. Just as despair threatened to completely overwhelm her, a soft weight settled against her side. Lumi, sensing her distress, had crept into the grotto and now pressed its warm, scaled body close to her. A soft, purring hum vibrated through the little dragon, a steady, calming rhythm that cut through the chaotic noise of her fears. Elara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding, and her tense shoulders relaxed. She stopped trying to force the song and simply rested a hand on Lumi's back, focusing on the simple, unconditional comfort of her friend's presence. In that moment of surrendered peace, her mind finally stilled. She wasn't Elara the anxious guardian anymore. She was just Elara, sitting with a friend, surrounded by the quiet magic of a sacred place. And it was in that stillness that the shift happened. The memories returned, but not as separate images. They flowed together, blending into a single, powerful current of emotion. The warmth of the hearth became the warmth of compassion she felt for the injured Lumi. The silent light patterns of the Emerald Flight became the unspoken understanding between friends. The fierce resilience of the sapphire cliffs became the steadfast love she held for her village. It wasn't a tune she could hum. It was a brilliant, silent pattern that bloomed behind her eyes, a complex tapestry woven from every thread of hope, every act of kindness, and every moment of connection she had ever experienced. It was the crystallization of her entire journey, not as a series of tasks, but as a transformation of her own spirit. This was her heart's song, a perfect, singular expression of renewal and hope, found not through force of will, but through the quiet strength of an open heart. With the song burning brightly within her, a calm certainty settled over her. The fear was gone, replaced by a serene readiness. She opened her eyes, gave Lumi a grateful stroke, and rose to her feet. The little dragon chirped softly, its eyes reflecting the new light of purpose it saw in her own. Together, they left the quiet grotto and walked back toward the vast central chamber of the Aerie. The great dragons were waiting, their massive forms arranged in a wide circle around the ancient, dimmed brazier that held the last embers of the eternal flame. Their heads were raised, their ancient eyes fixed on her, filled with a mixture of desperate hope and solemn patience. The stage, centuries in the waiting, was finally set. The ritual of renewal could begin. Stepping into the circle of ancient, watching dragons, Elara felt the immense weight of history settle upon her shoulders. The eternal flame was not the roaring pillar of fire from her village's grandest tales. It was a small, quiet brazier carved from a single piece of obsidian, its surface worn smooth by countless ages. Within its bowl, a few faint embers glowed with a tired, fading light, each pulse a little dimmer than the last. This was the heart of the magic, the source of all warmth and light, and it was dying. With hands that trembled not from fear, but from reverence, she arranged the ritual components around the ancient stone. The tears of the sun blossom, still radiant from the canyon's peak, went to the north. The emerald scale, shimmering with forest secrets, she placed to the east. The sapphire scale, hard won and gleaming with steadfast courage, found its home to the west. A space to the south remained open, waiting for the one element only she could provide. Taking a deep, steadying breath, Elara closed her eyes. The world of sight fell away, and she turned her focus inward, to the brilliant, silent symphony she had discovered in the grotto. It was there, waiting for her, a perfect pattern of memory, hope, and connection. She reached for it with her spirit, gathering its light, and then she offered it. She poured every ounce of that feeling out from her heart and directed it toward the fading embers in the brazier. For a breathtaking moment, nothing happened. Then a soft hum filled the air, a sound that was both a vibration in the stone beneath her feet and a resonance deep within her bones. The three physical components began to glow, each with its own distinct light. A thin, shimmering thread of gold, as fine as spider silk, emerged from her chest and stretched across the space, connecting her directly to the flame. The embers in the brazier stirred. They brightened, flaring with a soft, golden-orange light that cast gentle, dancing shadows against the watching dragons. A flicker of pure, triumphant hope leaped in Elara's chest. It was working, but the hope was short-lived. The flame did not roar to life. It wavered uncertainly, pulsing in and out like a struggling heartbeat. It would flare for a second, reaching for Chinese letter she offered, then shrink back, sputtering weakly as if it had forgotten how to burn. The thin thread of light connecting her to it strained, growing taut with the effort of maintaining the fragile connection. This was not the powerful renewal she had envisioned. This was a whisper when a shout was needed, The ritual was incomplete. Something vital was missing. A cold dread began to creep in at the edges of her concentration. Had she misinterpreted the song? Was her offering not pure enough? The eyes of the ancient dragons felt heavier upon her, their silent, desperate hope now tinged with a dawning sadness. This was their last, best chance, and she was failing them. The absolute stakes of the moment pressed down on her, threatening to shatter her focus. She was giving everything she had, pouring her entire self into the flame, and it was not enough. In that moment of terrifying realization, a new understanding bloomed in her mind. She had approached this as a transaction, a simple act of giving. She was offering her song, but the flame could not thrive on a gift alone. It needed an exchange. It needed a conversation. The bond between dragons and humanity had never been about one serving the other. It was a partnership, a sharing. She was trying to feed the flame, but she had not opened herself to be fed by it in return. The decision was instant and born of pure instinct. Instead of pushing more of her own energy down that straining thread of light, she did the opposite. She opened herself. She lowered the defenses around her heart and mind, making herself utterly vulnerable. With a silent, mental breath, she invited the flame in. She stopped speaking and prepared to listen. She stopped giving and made herself ready to receive. It was the most terrifying and courageous act of her entire journey, a leap of faith far greater than any step through a stone archway. She opened the doors of her soul and waited, hoping against hope that the ancient magic would remember the way. At first, there was only a trickle, a single, hesitant note of memory. It was the feeling of wind rushing over scales for the very first time, the dizzying thrill of a fledgling dragon taking its inaugural flight above the cloud-capped peaks. This was not her own memory, yet Elara experienced it with a clarity that stole her breath. Then the trickle became a flood, a vast symphony of consciousness, built over millennia, surged into the space she had opened within herself. She saw through 1,000 pairs of eyes the dawn of the world, when the mountains were still young and volcanoes painted the night sky with fire. She felt the profound, bone-deep pride of guardianship, the solemn duty to nurture the fragile spark of life across the lands. The joy of the dragons was a radiant sun, their connection to the earth, a steady, humming chord that resonated through every living thing. But woven through that splendor was a darker, more sorrowful melody, a slow, mournful dirge that had grown louder with each passing century. It was the ache of loneliness. She felt the precise moment when the harmonies of human songs, once a cherished part of their great symphony, began to fade from the collective memory of the Aerie. She witnessed the quiet grief of the dragons as the rhythmic footfalls of visiting guardians ceased to echo in their halls, replaced by an ever-deepening silence. The loneliness was not one of mere absence, but of a fundamental brokenness, as if a part of their own soul had been severed and forgotten. This was the true sickness, a spiritual malady born from a severed connection. Her own simple song, the pure expression of hope and care she had forged in the grotto, was suddenly a tiny, bright thread in this immense and complex tapestry. It did not try to overpower the dragon's symphony. Instead, it wove itself gently into the existing melodies, mending frayed edges and strengthening weakened chords. Her human hope began to heal their ancient loneliness, while their immense strength and timeless perspective gave her hope a foundation that could last for ages. The moment the connection became a true reciprocal flow, a balanced exchange of energy and spirit, the eternal flame erupted. It was not a gentle rekindling. It was a violent, glorious rebirth. A column of pure white fire shot up from the obsidian brazier, roaring with a sound like a mountain cracking open. The light was so intense, so blindingly pure, that Elara had to shield her eyes, yet she felt no heat that could burn, only a warmth that seeped into her very bones, washing away all fatigue and doubt. The dragons around her, who had been still as statues, stirred. Their dull scales began to shimmer, catching the new light and reflecting it in 1,000 dazzling colors across the cavern walls. The initial, explosive surge of power lasted only a few heartbeats before the flame settled, condensing into a strong, steady, brilliant blaze. It was no longer a desperate ember, but a vibrant heart of fire, pulsing with a rhythm that was now in perfect sync with Elara's own heartbeat and the collective breath of the dragons. The pressure of housing even a fraction of such ancient consciousnesses was overwhelming. It was like a single cup trying to hold an entire ocean. For a terrifying instant, Elara felt her own identity threatening to dissolve, to be swept away and lost forever in the vast river of draconic memory. The stakes in this internal battle were absolute. To fail was to be utterly consumed. But within that flood, she found an anchor. It was the memory of her village, the warmth of the hearth, the smell of the ember globe plants, the trusting face of young Anya. These were not weaker memories, but different ones, and they provided a necessary counterweight to the epic scale of the dragon's experience. Her key decision in that moment was not to resist the flow, but to embrace it fully while fiercely holding on to the essence of who she was. She chose to become the bridge, a structure that connects two shores without belonging entirely to either. This act forever altered the fabric of her soul, binding her destiny inextricably to the destiny of the dragons. She was no longer just Elara of the village. She was Elara, guardian of the eternal flame, a living link in a chain that had been broken and was now forged anew. As the flame roared with stable, triumphant life, a visible wave of warmth and light exploded outwards from the Aerie, a golden ripple of renewal racing across the mountains to touch the world below. From the heart of the great Aerie, a silent shock wave of pure magic expanded, a luminous tide of gold that washed over the stone spires and cascaded down the mountain's ancient slopes. It moved not like a destructive force, but like a gentle, inevitable dawn, illuminating the deepest shadows of the forest and setting the very air aglow with potential. In the village nestled in the valley below, the change was both instantaneous and profound. The central hearth flame, which had flickered so weakly for days, suddenly surged upward with a joyous roar. It was no longer just a source of warmth and light. It was a vibrant, living presence, its flames dancing with hues of amber and saffron that no one, not even the eldest elder, could recall ever seeing. The heat that radiated from it was a comforting embrace, banishing a chill that the villagers had grown so accustomed to they no longer even noticed it was there. In Elara's own small garden, the ember globe plants responded with immediate, breathtaking vigor. Their buds, which had remained stubbornly closed, unfurled in unison, petals glowing with an internal fire that mirrored the renewed hearth. They erupted into a full, radiant bloom, their light spilling across the soil like scattered coins of sunlight, a personal testament to the success of her impossible journey. But the most significant transformation was within the people themselves. A villager chopping wood paused, his axe hovering in mid-swing as a weight he had carried for years seemed to simply evaporate from his shoulders. A woman weaving at her loom felt a sudden, inexplicable smile spread across her face, her heart swelling with a sense of peace, so profound it brought tears to her eyes. It was a collective sigh of relief for an entire community, a lifting of a spiritual fog they never knew had descended. The subtle anxiety, the low-grade fear for the future, was replaced by a deep, unshakable certainty that they were part of something larger, something whole and good once more. This was the true restoration of the symbiotic bond, a reconnection not just of magic, but of spirit. The world's delicate balance, which had been slowly tilting toward silence and dimness, began to correct itself. The success of Elara's ritual confirmed the immense, world-altering importance of the Guardian's role. It was not merely a ceremonial title, it was a vital function, a necessary link without which both dragons and humanity would slowly diminish. Her decision to embrace that role, to face her doubts and offer the song of her heart, had actively healed a fracture in the very fabric of their world. As the golden wave of light faded from the sky, its work complete, a new energy began to stir within the Aerie. The great dragons, who had watched the ritual with a stillness born of desperate hope, now shifted their massive forms. The dull, ashen quality of their scales melted away, replaced by a lustrous sheen that reflected the brilliant flame, obsidian becoming a mirror, copper glowing like a new penny, emerald shining with deep forest light. Their eyes, once clouded with weary sadness, now sparkled with renewed fiery intelligence, focusing on the young woman who had given them back their future. The long silence of the great Aerie was broken by the sound of a deep, resonant breath, as the mountain itself seemed to awaken from a long and troubled sleep. The profound silence that had defined the great Aerie for so long was utterly shattered. It began with a single, resonant beat of wings, then another, and then a chorus of them, a percussive rhythm that echoed through the crystalline spires. Dragons, moments before slumped in lethargic despair, now pushed themselves into the air with powerful thrusts of their legs. Their movements, once slow and heavy, were now fluid and bursting with a vitality that was breathtaking to witness. The sky above the cavernous city, filled with a kaleidoscope of shimmering scales and graceful, soaring forms. Their roars, which had been little more than weary sighs, now rang out with a thunderous joy, not of menace, but of pure, unadulterated celebration. It was a symphony of rebirth, and Elara stood at its center, her head tilted back to take in the magnificent, overwhelming spectacle. They began to circle her, not in a menacing or predatory way, but in a formation of deep respect. Their great heads dipped as they passed, their fiery eyes meeting hers with an intelligence and gratitude that made her breath catch in her throat. She was not a curiosity to them, nor a subject. She was an equal. The ancient dragon, Ignis, landed before her with a grace that belied his immense size, the ground trembling only slightly under his weight. He lowered his colossal head until they were eye to eye, and his voice, like the rumbling of a distant avalanche, spoke directly into her mind once more, but this time it was filled with a warmth that felt like a physical embrace. Elara, daughter of the valley, you have done what none have for generations. You have reignited the flame, and restored the song of our souls. From this day forward, you are the guardian of the eternal flame, the first in centuries, and the bridge upon which our futures will walk. The weight of the title settled upon her shoulders, a tangible thing. It was not a burden of stone, but one of light and responsibility. Her life, the simple, predictable path of tending herbs and listening to stories by the hearth, was gone forever. In its place was a new existence, vast and unknown. A quiet conflict stirred within her, a flicker of the old Elara, who wondered if she was truly worthy of such an honor, if a simple village girl could possibly hold a title of such cosmic importance. But as she looked at the soaring dragons, felt the warm hum of the revitalized eternal flame against her skin, and remembered the desperate hope in Ignis's eyes just moments before, the doubt melted away. She met the elder dragon's gaze and accepted the mantle not with pride, but with a humble and determined heart. This was her purpose now, not just a task she had completed, but the very definition of who she was meant to be. Her personal journey was no longer about a single quest. The stakes had escalated from saving her home to shaping a new way of life for two interconnected species. She would need to learn, to grow, and to understand the full breadth of what being a guardian truly meant. It was a future both terrifying and impossibly beautiful. As this new reality washed over her, a familiar, cheerful chirp broke through her reverie. Lumi, now bursting with the same energy that filled the Aerie, nudged her hand insistently with its snout. Its scale shimmered with vibrant, happy colors, and its large eyes looked toward the cavern's exit, back the way they had come. It was time to return home, to bring the news of their success to the village. But Elara knew, with absolute certainty, that this journey back would be nothing like the anxious trek that had brought her here. She was not the same person who had left, and the world itself had been remade. The path home felt like an entirely different world from the one Elara had nervously traversed just days before, where twisted roots and foreboding shadows had once tested her resolve. A clear and sun-dappled trail now unfurled before her. The ancient trees seemed to lean in with a friendly curiosity, their leaves whispering a gentle, welcoming rustle on a breeze that carried the sweet scent of blooming night bloom flowers. With every step, she could feel it, a low, resonant hum that rose from the very soil beneath her boots, a vibration of pure, healed magic that traveled up through her bones and into her heart. It was the pulse of the world itself, steady and strong and warm, a constant reminder that she was no longer a stranger in these woods, but a part of their rhythm. Lumi was her joyous companion, no longer a tentative guide, but a partner in flight. The little Dragonette zipped through the canopy overhead, its iridescent scales catching slivers of sunlight and scattering them like living jewels across the forest floor. It would swoop down to circle her head, chirping a cheerful melody that seemed to harmonize with the hum of the land, before soaring back up to chase a glittering moth or simply roll playfully in a warm air current. Its presence was a tangible thread connecting her to the great Aerie, a living symbol of the bond she had fought so hard to restore. This journey was not a retreat from her new destiny, but its first true expression, a quiet pilgrimage that allowed her to fully absorb the profound shift within herself and the world around her. She understood now that her life would forever be a balance between two worlds. She carried the quiet, earthy wisdom of her village, the simple truths of planting seasons and hearth warmth, but it was now intertwined with the soaring, ancient song of the dragons, a melody of fire, flight, and deep, patient time. This dual identity was not a burden to bear, but a perspective to cherish. With each mile that passed, she gathered her thoughts, considering how she would share this immense truth with the people she loved. She wasn't returning just with a tale of adventure, but with a new chapter for their history, a responsibility to teach them that their safety and prosperity were part of a vast, beautiful symbiosis they had unknowingly been missing. The stakes of this homecoming were profound in their own gentle way. The ritual's success in the Aerie was one thing, a magnificent, world-altering event high in the mountains. But its true victory would be measured here, in the hearts of her neighbors and friends. Would they understand? Would they accept the reality of dragons not as distant legends, but as partners? Would they embrace her new role, or would it cast her as an outsider? Her mission was to bridge not just species, but generations of forgotten history, to weave the dragon's song back into the fabric of their daily lives. She had to make them see that the brilliant flame burning in their square was not just their own, but a shared heartbeat. As the familiar scent of wood smoke and baking bread began to lace the air, signaling the nearness of the village outskirts, Alara's pace slowed. Cresting a small, final rise, the sight that greeted her made her breath catch. The entire community was there, gathered in the square. Men, women, and children stood silently, their faces turned toward the mountain path, waiting. And above them, the village's central hearth flame burned with a fierce, golden intensity she had never seen, its light pushing back the twilight and painting their hopeful faces in warm, dancing tones. They had felt the change. They knew something momentous had occurred. A hero's welcome surely awaited, but beneath it lay a thick blanket of uncertainty and 1,000 unasked questions. The stunned silence that greeted Elara's return was a solid, palpable thing, a collective breath held by her entire world. She stood at the edge of the village square, the weight of the mountains still on her shoulders, with Lumi perched cautiously on her own, its glowing eyes reflecting the faces of the people she had known her entire life. She saw her own mother, a hand clasped over her mouth. She saw the blacksmith, his heavy tools forgotten on the ground. She saw the children, peeking out from behind adult legs, their eyes wide not with fear, but with a dawning, impossible wonder. Then, as if a single string had been cut, the silence snapped. A wave of sound erupted, cheers, gasps, a joyful cry, and the crowd surged forward, not to overwhelm her, but to form a ring of awe around the young woman and her magical companion. Elara did not launch into a grand, rehearsed speech. Instead, she simply began to speak from her heart, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the celebratory noise. She told them of the flickering flame and its true cause, not some failing of their own, but a deep and distant sorrow. She spoke of the Great Aerie, not as a myth, but as a real place, a city of crystalline spires where magnificent beings were fading into silence. She described the symbiotic pact, a beautiful and fragile agreement between their two kinds, a sharing of warmth and spirit that had sustained both village and dragon for eons, a truth that had been lost to the slow erosion of time and the comfort of peace. And finally, her voice trembling only slightly, she told them of her new title, the one given to her by the great dragon Ignis himself. She was the guardian now, the living bridge, the keeper of the bond. The tension in the air shifted from shock to profound, quiet revelation. You could see it on their faces, a reassembly of their entire understanding of the world. The stories they told their children were not just fables. The mountain they avoided was not just wilderness. Their hearth fire was not just for cooking and warmth. It was a thread in a vast, magical tapestry. Elara's decision in this moment was crucial. She chose not to stand above them as a chosen one, but to stand with them as a teacher. Her aim was not to command belief, but to gently unravel generations of forgetting and to lovingly reweave the connection, starting with the raw, honest truth. The stakes of this moment could not have been higher. The ritual in the Aerie had been a technical success, a magical fix, but it would be meaningless if the human half of the Pact failed to embrace it. The future of the renewed bond, the very promise of a world where dragons and humans shared the sky and the earth, hinged entirely on this village's acceptance. Would they retreat into fear and doubt, clinging to their old, smaller world, or would they, too, have the courage to step into a larger, more magical story? As the villagers processed her words, murmuring to one another with looks of wonder and dawning comprehension, Elder Kalin stepped out from the crowd. His face, which had been lined with worry when she left, was now softened with a reverence so deep it seemed to smooth away the years. He did not look at her with the skepticism of an elder confronting an unbelievable tale, but with the awe of a scholar finally seeing a lost text made real. He moved slowly toward her, his eyes holding hers, and then he offered not a question, but a responsibility. He asked her to become the keeper of the village's new story, the scribe of this reborn history, so that it might never be lost again. Elder Kalin held the book out to her, its leather cover soft and worn, even though the pages within were empty. It was not a new object, but an old one, patiently waiting for this very moment. "This is our history," he said, his voice a low murmur meant only for her, though the entire village listened. "And you, Elara, have given us the first new chapter in more generations than I can count. Your duty now is to ensure this story is never lost. It is a sacred task, perhaps the most sacred of all." Her fingers trembled slightly as she took the weight of it, the binding cool against her palm. She understood instantly that this was not a gift, but a responsibility as vital as the ritual itself. A flame could be rekindled, but if the knowledge of how to do so vanished into the fog of time, all would be lost once more. Her role as guardian now had a second, deeply solemn dimension. She was not just the bridge between species, but the bridge between the past and the future, a keeper of stories. The sheer scale of the task settled upon her shoulders, a different kind of weight than the physical exhaustion of her journey. How could mere words on a page possibly capture the thunderous voice of Ignis speaking inside her mind, or the terrifying, beautiful symphony of the dragon's shared memories? How could she describe the feel of Lumi's trust, the soft nudge of its snout against her hand, or the heart-stopping vista of the great Aerie waking from its long slumber? The conflict was internal, a quiet panic that her language was too small, her understanding too human, to do justice to the magic she had witnessed. It was a historian's fear, the terror of every storyteller who has ever tried to pin a profound truth to the page, knowing something will always escape. The stakes were invisibly high, for a story poorly told could become a legend misunderstood, and a legend misunderstood could, over centuries, twist the Pact into something it was never meant to be. Yet, looking from the elder's earnest face to the hopeful eyes of her neighbors, and finally down to the curious tilt of Lumi's head, her decision was made with a calm certainty. She cradled the book to her chest and nodded, a silent vow passing between her and the elder. She would accept this charge. She would find the words. Preserving this knowledge was not a separate duty from protecting the flame. It was the very same thing. A flame needs fuel to burn, and a story needs a teller to live. By committing it all to paper, she would become that teller, ensuring that even if another age of forgetting should ever come, the path back would be clearly marked for whoever had the courage to follow it. That evening, the communal hearth burned with a steady, unwavering light that painted the entire square in warm, dancing shadows. The air was filled with the comfortable sounds of her community at peace, the murmur of conversation, and the scent of shared meals. Elara found a quiet spot at the edge of the warmth, the blank book open on her lap. Lumi curled into a contented, glowing ball at her feet, its soft purr a gentle rhythm in the night. She dipped her quill into a small pot of ink, its tip hovering over the pristine page. The first mark was always the hardest, the moment before a story begins. Taking a deep breath, she let it out slowly and began to write the title that would define her life's work. The words flowed from her quill in careful, deliberate script, guardians of the eternal flame. Elara's new life began not with the solemn silence of the archives, but with the bright, bubbling energy of children. She gathered the youngest members of the village in a wide circle around the communal hearth, its flame now a steady, vibrant presence that seemed to lean in and listen. She held the ancient book in her lap, but she did not open it. Today, the lesson would not be read, it would be lived. A small hand shot up from the circle, a little boy named Finn, whose eyes were wide with anticipation. "Are you going to tell us a story about the dragons?" he asked, his voice full of wonder. Elara smiled, a genuine, warm expression that put the children at ease. She told them she had a story, but that it was not just for listening. It was a story for feeling, for seeing, and most importantly, for sharing. With a soft whistle, she called for Lumi. The little Dragonette, now a familiar and beloved sight in the village, swooped down from a nearby rooftop, its iridescent scales catching the firelight and scattering tiny rainbows across the children's awe-struck faces. It landed gracefully on Elara's shoulder, chirping a cheerful greeting. "This is Lumi," Elara said, "and a friend." The children gasped, a few of the braver ones edging closer. She encouraged them, holding out her arms so Lumi could hop down and walk among them. She showed them how to hold out a flat, calm hand, how to move slowly and speak softly. "Do not be afraid," she whispered. "Friendship is built on trust, not fear." One by one, the children reached out, their small fingers gently stroking Lumi's warm, surprisingly soft scales. They felt the faint hum of magic that vibrated within the little creature, a sensation that was strange but not frightening. In that moment, the concept of a dragon shifted in their minds from a monster of legend into a living, breathing being worthy of gentleness and care. Next, Elara turned their attention back to the flame itself. She asked them to close their eyes and just feel its warmth on their skin. "Can you feel how it is different from a campfire?" she asked them. "Is it warmer? Does it feel lighter?" The children nodded, their faces serious with concentration. One little girl, Anya, who always watched from the very edge of the group with quiet, intelligent eyes, spoke up. "It feels like it's humming," she said quietly. "It feels happy." Alara's heart swelled. "Exactly," she said. "This flame is not just fire, it is a connection. It is a piece of a much bigger magic, a promise we made long ago to our friends in the mountains." She explained that the flame's health was a reflection of that friendship, and its warmth was a gift they all shared. The most challenging part came when she tried to teach them the language of the Emerald Flight. The intricate patterns of light were a complex, non-verbal form of communication that required immense focus and a calm spirit. She demonstrated the simplest pattern she knew, a gentle pulse of soft green light that emanated from a crystal she held in her palm. It meant hello, or I come in peace. The children watched, mesmerized, then tried to mimic it with their own hands and voices, creating a chaotic display of wiggling fingers and giggles. It was not perfect. It was messy and full of mistakes. A few of the younger ones grew frustrated, their brows furrowed in concentration. The minor conflict was not one of danger, but of patience and comprehension, translating an ancient, magical concept into something a child could grasp. Elara did not scold them for their failed attempts. Instead, she laughed with them. She praised every flicker of light, every earnest effort. She decided in that moment that perfection was not the goal. Understanding was. She wanted them to associate this magic with joy and curiosity, not with pressure or failure. She broke the pattern down into smaller movements, turning it into a game. "Let's make our fingers dance like fireflies," she suggested. "Can your firefly say hello to Lumi's firefly?" The tension melted away, replaced by playful experimentation. Lumi, delighted, hopped from child to child, responding to their clumsy attempts with its own perfect, graceful pulses of light, offering encouragement and turning the lesson into a delightful conversation. Watching the children's faces, alight with wonder and the reflected glow of the flame, Elara felt a profound shift within herself. The weight of her duty, which had felt so immense and solitary, now felt shared. It was being passed on, not as a burden, but as a gift of wonder to the next generation. These children would grow up not with stories of fear and isolation, but with first-hand knowledge of the dragon's friendship. They would feel the warmth of the connected flame as a normal part of their lives. The future guardianship of the Pact was no longer an abstract hope. It was being nurtured right here, in the laughter of these children and the gentle nudge of a dragonette against their hands. A deep, settled peace flowed through her, a certainty that this was her true purpose. This was only the very beginning of a new era, and she was there to help it grow. A hush fell over the group of children as Elara concluded her lesson on the light patterns, their usual boisterous energy replaced by the quiet concentration of their task. Small hands wobbled, trying to steady the crystals that were supposed to pulse with soft light, but most produced only faint, flickering glimmers. It was a scene of earnest effort, filled with the gentle frustration of learning something profoundly new. Then, from the edge of the circle, a different light emerged. It was not a flicker, but a clear, steady pulse of emerald green that held its shape for a perfect moment before fading. All eyes turned to Anya, the quiet girl who usually observed from the periphery. She wasn't looking at her own crystal, but at Lumi, The little dragonette had been chittering softly, its own scales flashing in a complex, fleeting sequence. Without any instruction, Anya had not only seen the pattern, but had understood its meaning and flawlessly replicated it. Her crystal glowed again, this time in a series of short, quick bursts, a perfect echo of Lumi's own cheerful greeting. The air itself seemed to change, charged with a new kind of potential. Lumi tilted its head, its large, intelligent eyes fixed on Anya, and responded with a sequence of its own, more complex than any it had shown the children before. Anya watched, her expression one of deep focus, and then, after a moment of silent absorption, she answered. It wasn't a perfect copy this time, but an interpretation, a simpler yet respectful reply that carried the same essential feeling. In that silent exchange, a conversation had happened. It was a dialogue not of words, but of light and intention, a bridge built between human and dragon in a way that felt instinctual, effortless. Elara felt her breath catch. She had worked for months to achieve that level of connection, studying and practicing with intense dedication. For Anya, it seemed as natural as breathing. Witnessing this, a profound sense of rightness settled over Elara, a feeling as warm and steady as the hearth flame beside them. This was more than just a clever child mimicking a trick. This was an affinity, a rare spark of the guardian spirit that she herself had felt on her journey, an innate understanding of the connection between all things, a sensitivity to the subtle languages of the world. The consequences of this moment were immense, unfolding silently in Elara's mind. She was looking at the future. The lineage of the Guardians, so recently restored, now had a potential heir. The continuity of the Pact, the safety of the flame, the bond between their village and the Aerie, all of it suddenly felt more secure, more enduring, because that sacred duty had found its next bearer without any force or search. It had simply revealed itself. There was no conflict in this revelation, no drama or struggle. The tension was purely hopeful, a beautiful, anticipatory pull toward a future she had dared to envision, but hadn't truly believed she would see take root so soon. The decision before her was clear and felt instinctively correct. She would not formalize this. She would not pull Anya aside and burden her with the weight of a title or a destiny. That would be like trying to force a delicate flower to bloom by prying its petals open. Instead, Elara resolved to nurture this spark with the lightest and most gentle of touches. She would provide opportunities for Anya and Lumi to interact, offer quiet encouragement, and share stories that would feed her natural curiosity. She would mentor by creating an environment where Anya's unique gift could flourish on its own terms, at its own pace, becoming a source of joy rather than a burden of expectation. The stakes of this approach could not be higher, yet they felt peaceful. The long-term future of the guardianship, the very magic that warmed their homes and connected their world, now had a clear and promising path forward. It was a security that reached far beyond Elara's own lifetime, a promise whispered on the wind that the flame would never be forgotten again. Watching Anya now, her face lit with a quiet smile as Lumi chirped happily at her, Elara felt a deep, satisfying smile spread across her own face. Her own arduous journey, her fears and triumphs, had all led to this singular, peaceful moment. She had not just rekindled a flame, she had planted a seed. And now, she had the profound privilege of watching it begin to grow, knowing that the legacy of the Guardians was in the most natural and capable of hands for generations to come. The first sign of the visitor was not a sound, but a shift in the light. A cool, deep blue shadow fell across the village square, moving with a purpose that the clouds above did not possess. All chatter and activity ceased as every head turned upward to see a magnificent dragon, its scales the color of a twilight sky, descending with a grace that seemed to defy its substantial size. It was sleeker than the great elder Ignis, built for speed and distance, and it landed on the cobblestones with a soft, precise touch that spoke of immense control. In its talons, it held not a weapon, but a slender, polished tube, crafted from a single piece of dark, gleaming wood. The dragon's intelligent eyes scanned the gathered, startled villagers before settling unerringly on Elara. It dipped its head in a gesture of clear respect and extended the message tube. With a steadying breath that did little to calm the sudden racing of her heart, Elara stepped forward and accepted it. The wood was warm to the touch. Unrolling the delicate parchment within, she found not words written in ink, but a series of intricate, raised symbols that pulsed with a gentle, sapphire light. The message was from Ignis, and as her fingers traced the patterns, their meaning flowed directly into her mind. It was an invitation, a summons to a gathering of immense importance. Dragons from every flight and, it was hoped, representatives from human settlements across the region were to convene at the Great Aerie for a conclave. Its purpose was to formally re-establish the bonds that had frayed over centuries of silence, to create a new accord for a new age. The weight of the invitation was both exhilarating and daunting. Her world, which had so recently expanded to include her village and the Aerie, was now on the verge of becoming unimaginably vast. Her influence, born from a single act of renewal, was now being called upon to seed that renewal across the entire land. The consequences of this were profound. No longer was she just the guardian of her village's flame. She was becoming a key figure in a movement, a living bridge between species on a scale she had never contemplated. The quiet life of a teacher and chronicler was now intertwined with the responsibilities of a diplomat. The primary tension she felt was no longer about overcoming a direct threat, but about the immense challenge of scaling such a personal connection into a regional alliance. Could the simple, heartfelt principles of mutual respect and understanding that had worked for her be applied to communities that might be wary, set in their ways, or even fearful of dragons? The potential for misunderstanding and conflict was immense, and the success of this conclave would depend entirely on her ability to translate her unique experience into a shared vision. Yet, there was no hesitation in her decision. Looking from the sapphire messenger to the faces of her fellow villagers, who watched her with a mixture of awe and pride, she knew her answer. She had been given a gift, a chance to heal a wound in the world, and to refuse to share that healing would be a betrayal of everything she had learned and become. She accepted the invitation, her resolve hardening not with arrogance, but with a humble readiness to serve as a voice for cooperation. The stakes had escalated dramatically. This was no longer just about the prosperity of her home or the health of the dragons she had come to love. The peace and future of every human settlement and every dragon flight in the region now hung in the balance, dependent on the fragile, hopeful work of this gathering. Preparing for the journey felt different this time. As she packed her satchel, her hands lingered on the leather-bound book, gifted to her by Elder Kalin. She tucked it carefully inside, its blank pages a silent promise. She knew this journey would not just be about attending a meeting. It would be about listening, learning, and collecting. The stories of other villages, the histories of the other dragon flights, the hopes and fears of strangers, they would all need to be recorded, understood, and woven into the growing tapestry of their renewed world. The circle of connection, once a small, fragile thread between a single mountain and a single valley, was now poised to widen into a vast, interlinked web of light and understanding, and she held the quill that would help write its first new chapter. Arriving at the Great Aerie for the Conclave felt like stepping into a living tapestry woven from legend and newfound hope. The vast crystalline chamber, once a place of weary silence, now hummed with a vibrant, low thrum of energy. But it was not only dragons who filled the space. To her astonishment, Elara saw small clusters of humans, standing with a mixture of awe and determination on their faces. They had journeyed from villages nestled in distant valleys and from settlements along far-off rivers, all drawn by the same inexplicable pull, the same renewal of magic that had revitalized their own hearths and fields. These were not warriors or kings, but farmers, crafters, and elders, their hands still bearing the marks of their labor, their eyes wide with the reality of the myths standing before them. The initial atmosphere was thick with a fragile tension, a silent symphony of centuries-old caution. The dragons, representing the emerald, sapphire, and other lesser-known flights, regarded the human newcomers with a reserved curiosity. The humans, in turn, struggled to meet the gaze of creatures so immense and powerful, their postures a blend of reverence and deeply ingrained fear. The conflict was not one of shouted arguments or visible aggression, but a far more subtle and challenging struggle against the weight of history itself. Centuries of isolationism had built invisible walls between their kinds, and the quiet in the chamber was a testament to how high those walls still stood. The peace of the entire region genuinely hung in the balance, dependent on whether these two worlds could remember how to speak to one another. It was in this delicate silence that Elara found her purpose evolving once more. She was not there as a ruler or a judge, but as a translator of intentions. Her unique position, as the one who had already crossed that divide, made her the essential mediator. She decided to begin not with grand pronouncements or complex treaties, but with a story. She stepped into the center of the gathering, with Lumi, a reassuring presence at her side, and simply began to speak. She told them of her village's flickering flame, her journey through the whispering woods, and her first tentative encounter with the Dragonette. She spoke of the profound weariness of the dragons, not as a weakness, but as a sadness born from a broken connection. She framed her entire quest not as a heroic conquest, but as an act of listening, of learning to communicate in ways that went beyond words. Her story became the key that began to unlock the stalemate. Encouraged by her humility and the obvious truth in her words, one of the human elders from a northern village tentatively shared his own experience. He spoke of the sudden, unexplained blooming of crops that had been struggling, and a newfound sense of security that had settled over his people. Then, an elder from the Emerald Flight responded, not with words, but by causing the intricate patterns on his scales to shimmer with a soft, green light. a display that Elara gently explained was a form of greeting, a sign of peace. This small exchange sparked a cascade of others. A craftswoman demonstrated a weaving technique that mirrored the scales of a dragon, and a young sapphire dragon let out a low, melodic rumble that translated through Elara as an appreciation for the craft. This gradual, patient sharing of small truths became the foundation upon which they built. The formal accord they drafted was not a list of rigid rules and demands, but a set of shared principles. It spoke of open skies and safe passage, of mutual aid in times of hardship, and most importantly, of the commitment to keep communicating. The final sealing of the pact was a moment of pure, wordless magic. All participants, human and dragon alike, gathered around the eternal flame, which now burned with a steady, brilliant intensity. There were no signatures on parchment. Instead, they simply stood in a shared, silent moment of understanding, their collective hope and willingness focused on the flame. A wave of warm, golden light pulsed outward from the brazier, washing over everyone in the chamber, and in that light, the new chapter for the Age of Dragons truly began, not with a decree, but with a feeling of profound and unified purpose. Returning from the momentous gathering at the Great Aerie, Elara carried with her more than just the memory of new alliances and hopeful promises. Nestled safely in her pack, wrapped in soft cloth that seemed to hum with a gentle warmth, was the Dragon's Gift. It was a singular, breathtaking treasure, a fragment of the very eternal flame itself, carefully encased within a crystal of pure, polished obsidian. The flame within did not roar or crackle like a common fire, but instead glowed with a steady, peaceful light, a miniature sun contained within a sphere of dark glass. Its warmth was not the heat of a forge, but something far more profound, a comforting radiance that seemed to soothe the soul as much as it warmed the skin. Upon her arrival, the entire village gathered, their attention immediately captured by the otherworldly object she carefully revealed. Elder Kalin, his eyes reflecting the crystal's soft luminescence, was the first to understand its significance. With his blessing, and with the help of the village stonemasons, a new hearth was built right in the center of the square. It was not a grand, imposing structure, but a simple circle of river-smoothed stones, low enough for a child to approach, with a small pedestal at its center to cradle the magical crystal. As Elara placed the gift upon its stand, the light within the crystal seemed to pulse, growing just a fraction brighter, as if acknowledging its new home. This was not meant to replace the great central hearth of the village, but to complement it, to serve as a constant, tangible symbol of the bond that had been reforged. It was a promise made physical, a piece of the mountain's heart now living among them. The effect on daily life was immediate and beautiful. The new hearth, which the children quickly nicknamed the Heartstone, became the undeniable centerpiece of the community. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the peaks, villagers would naturally gravitate toward its warm, inviting glow. They would bring their mending, their carving, or simply themselves, settling on the new benches placed around the square. The conversations held there were different now, no longer just about the weather or the harvest, but often filled with wonder. They would speak of the dragons they had glimpsed soaring high above, or share old half-remembered tales from their grandparents, trying to piece together the history they had almost lost. The Heartstone's light seemed to encourage this openness, this gentle curiosity about the wider, more magical world they were now a part of. Occasionally, that world would come to them. A dragon from the Emerald Flight, perhaps the very one who had gifted Elara its scale, might descend from the sky with a graceful rustle of leaf-like wings, landing softly at the edge of the square. It would not stay long, simply offering a respectful dip of its head before taking off again, but its brief visits were never met with fear. Children would wave, and adults would offer a gesture of greeting Elara had taught them, a slow movement of the hand meant to mimic the light patterns of the forest dragons. These visits were quiet affirmations that the Pact was real and active, a thread of connection being woven back and forth between the mountain Aerie and the village below. Life began to settle into this new, enriched rhythm, a cozy normalcy where the fantastic was woven seamlessly into the fabric of the everyday. Weeks melted into months, and the quiet harmony of the village was now punctuated by a new, wondrous sight. Lumi, once small enough to curl contentedly in Elara's lap, underwent a magnificent transformation. His form stretched and strengthened, his iridescent scales catching the light in dazzling new ways, until the day he stood proudly before her, his back level with her shoulder. The first time she tentatively swung a leg over, settling into the comfortable dip just behind his neck. It felt less like learning a new skill and more like remembering something her soul had always known how to do. Their bond, already a thread of deep affection, now wove itself into the very fabric of their movements. A slight shift of her weight, a soft spoken word, or even a shared thought was all the direction Lumi needed. They moved as one entity, a seamless partnership soaring above the world they had worked so hard to heal. This new ability unlocked a freedom Elara had never before imagined. Their flights were not merely for travel, but for pure, unadulterated joy. Some days, their destination was the Great Aerie, the journey now a matter of breathtaking minutes instead of an arduous trek. They would glide through the sunlit caverns, greeted by the resonant, welcoming calls of the great dragons who now saw Elara not just as their guardian, but as kin. Other evenings, they sought no destination at all. They would simply climb the warm thermal currents rising from the valley, flying just to watch the sun paint the towering peaks in brilliant shades of orange and violet. In those silent, shared moments, suspended between the earth and the stars, their connection became the most powerful magic of all. It was a living, breathing embodiment of the Pact, a friendship that had bridged two worlds and now took to the skies. From this impossible vantage point, Elara's understanding of her home underwent a profound shift. Looking down, the village was no longer the entire world, but a single, beautiful part of a much greater tapestry. She could trace the silver ribbon of the river that watered their fields all the way to its source high in the mountains. She saw the dark, inviting expanse of the whispering woods and the gentle paths of light that crisscrossed the land, visible only from above. Her village, with its brightly shining Heartstone, was a single point of warm light in a vast, interconnected landscape. This perspective washed away the last vestiges of any isolated, fearful thinking. She saw with crystal clarity how the health of the dragons in their Aerie was tied to the vitality of the forest, which in turn fed the river that gave life to her people. Every element was a thread in the same magnificent design, and she and Lumi were now honored witnesses to the whole glorious picture. The idea for the Festival of the Flame began as a simple suggestion from Elder Kalin, but it ignited a collective excitement that swept through the village like a warm wind. Everyone, from the youngest child to the most seasoned elder, threw themselves into the preparations, weaving garlands of summer blossoms and baking sweet honey cakes infused with sun-dried thyme. The air itself seemed to buzz with anticipation, a palpable energy that grew stronger as the day approached. When the festival finally dawned, the village square was transformed. The new Heartstone, with its fragment of the eternal flame, blazed at the center, and around it, the entire community gathered, their faces turned toward the sky in hopeful expectation. The arrival of the dragons was a moment that would be etched into memory forever. They did not appear with terrifying roars, but with a graceful, silent descent that belied their immense size. First came the Emerald Flight, their scales shimmering with 1,000 shades of green and gold. They settled around the edges of the forest, and as dusk began to fall, they began their display. Without a sound, complex patterns of soft light danced across their hides, painting stories of ancient forests and starlit groves in the gathering twilight. The villagers watched in rapt silence, their awe a quiet tribute to the beauty unfolding before them. Then, as if answering the silent call of the emeralds, the sapphire flight descended from the high peaks. They filled the sky with breathtaking acrobatics, twisting and diving in perfect, powerful formations that carved swirls through the clouds, their deep blue scales reflecting the last rays of the sun. Perhaps the most poignant part of the evening was the symbolic play. Elara, with Anya standing confidently beside her, reenacted the Ritual of Renewal. They used crafted props for the tears of the sun blossom and the dragon scales, and when the moment came for the heart's song, Elara simply held out her hand toward the Heartstone. A soft, warm light pulsed from her palm to the flame, which swelled in response, casting a golden glow over the entire square. It was a simplified version of the true, life-altering magic she had performed, but its meaning was crystal clear. It was not a story of a lone hero, but a lesson about connection, trust, and the courage to rebuild what was lost. The children in the audience watched with wide, serious eyes, understanding on a fundamental level the importance of the pact they were now a part of. The festival culminated in a shared spectacle that united both species. As full night embraced the village, the great elder Ignis, who had watched the proceedings with a fond, paternal air, lifted his magnificent head. With a gentle, controlled breath, he sent a stream of brilliant sparks high into the air. The other dragons joined him, each adding their own unique hues to the display. The night sky exploded into a silent, radiant fireworks show of pure magic, a kaleidoscope of color that danced and shimmered without a single loud bang. It was a celebration of light itself, a testament to the peaceful, creative power that flowed from their renewed alliance. Standing there, surrounded by her joyful village and her dragon friends, with Lumi's warm wing resting gently against her side, Elara felt a profound sense of completion. This festival was more than a party. It was the weaving of their new reality into the very fabric of their culture, a promise to never forget again, celebrated under a sky alight with shared joy. This moment was far more than a simple writing lesson. It was a quiet ceremony in itself, witnessed only by the two of them and the gentle crackle of the hearth. Elara watched Anya's small hand, which had so recently been perfect at mimicking the light patterns of the emerald dragons, now carefully clutch the feathered quill. The girl's brow was furrowed in concentration, her tongue peeking out slightly as she focused on forming each letter with the same deliberate care she used in all her tasks. Elara's own hand rested lightly over Anya's, not to steer or correct, but to share the weight of the moment, to feel the connection between her own hard-won wisdom and the eager potential flowing from the girl beside her. The ink on the page told the story of the festival, of the joyous lights and the shared wonder, but the true story was being written in the space between them. Elara felt a profound shift within herself as she guided Anya's hand. She was no longer just the sole guardian, the lone bridge between two worlds. She was now a link in a chain, a teacher ensuring that the knowledge she had fought so hard to reclaim would not end with her. This conscious choice to share her authority was perhaps the most important decision she had made since the ritual itself. It required a deep trust, a vulnerability in admitting that the future of the Pact did not rely solely on her own strength, but on her ability to nurture it in another. The gentle tension in the air was not one of fear, but of immense responsibility, a silent prayer that every word transcribed would be understood not just as history, but as a living promise. When the final sentence was written, detailing the silent, magical fireworks that had lit up the night sky, Anya carefully set the quill down. She beamed with a pride that was pure and unburdened, her entire face alight with the significance of what they had just done together. Her small fingers, now dotted with a single tiny spot of ink, traced the fresh writing on the page before she gently, almost reverently, closed the heavy leather-bound book. She looked up at Elara, and in her eyes was not just excitement for the future, but a new, deeper understanding of her place within it. The lineage of the Guardian, once a thread so thin it had nearly vanished, now felt as strong and enduring as the mountain itself, securely woven into the heart of the next generation. The afternoon sun fell across the village square in long, golden bands, warming the stone bench where Elara sat. It was a simple moment, the kind that would have passed unnoticed before her journey, but now every detail felt profound. Children shrieked with laughter as they chased a glimmering light sprite that had drifted down from the mountains, a new and welcome visitor. Adults moved between the cottages and the communal ovens, their conversations a gentle murmur against the backdrop of the crackling hearth. The air itself seemed to shimmer with a subtle vitality, a constant warm hum that was the breath of the renewed eternal flame. Lumi, now too large to curl entirely on her lap, had rested its great, iridescent head there instead, the deep, rumbling purr vibrating through Elara like a contented heartbeat. This was the peace she had fought for, not a silent emptiness, but a world brimming with harmonious life. She allowed her gaze to drift from the playing children to the steady flame at the center of the square. It was no longer just a source of heat or a symbol of tradition. It was a living pulse, a thread of connection stretching all the way back to the great Aerie, woven into the very fabric of their daily existence. She remembered the terrifying flicker that had started it all, the cold dread that had gripped her heart. Now, that memory was softened by the overwhelming evidence of success surrounding her. The ember globe plants in the nearby gardens bloomed with an impossible radiance, their petals holding the light of both sun and flame. The very stones of the square seemed to hold the day's warmth longer, as if infused with the dragon fire's enduring spirit. This was the consequence of her choices, a stability that felt as deep and unshakable as the mountains themselves. There was no battle to fight here, no ancient ritual to perform, no internal struggle against doubt. The tension that had been her constant companion for so long had finally dissolved, leaving behind a quiet readiness. Her decision in this moment was a conscious one, to not plan, not worry, not look for the next task. It was to simply be present, to absorb the joy of the community as if it were sunlight, storing it within herself. She felt the weight of her responsibilities not as a burden, but as a comfortable mantle, a purpose that was now perfectly integrated into the rhythm of her life. The stakes had been the survival of magic and memory, and the reward was this profound, everyday happiness, a treasure more valuable than any dragon's hoard. Lumi shifted its head, nuzzling her hand with a warm snout, and Elara smiled, running her fingers over the smooth, cool scales between its eyes. This creature, once a helpless dragonette in a sunlit cavern, was now her closest friend, a living testament to the bond she had restored. She closed her eyes, letting the sensory tapestry of the moment wash over her, the warmth of the sun on her face, blending with the warmth of the flame on her skin and the warmth of Lumi's affection. This deep, resonant peace was the ultimate reward, the final, quiet note in the symphony of renewal. It was a feeling she would carry with her always, a wellspring of strength for whatever chapters were yet to be written. That moment of profound connection during the ritual, when her own hopeful melody intertwined with the ancient symphony of the dragons, was the true turning point. It was the peak of the mountain she had climbed, a crescendo of light and understanding that had reshaped the world. But a climax is a single moment in time, a flash of intense transformation that must be followed by the evidence of its success. And that evidence was not found in a grand ceremony or a dramatic battle. It was here, in the quiet, cozy reality of the village square, on a warm afternoon. The victory was not a trophy to be displayed, but a feeling to be lived. It was in the laughter of children who had never known a time when dragons were mere legends, in the steady, confident warmth of the hearth that would never again falter, and in the gentle weight of a dragon's head resting trustingly in her lap. The highest stakes imaginable had been met, not with a sword, but with a choice to remember, to understand, and to care. This was the beautiful, quiet truth of her triumph. The adversary was never a monstrous beast or a dark sorcerer lurking in a tower. The true enemy was far more insidious and just as dangerous, the slow, creeping shadow of forgetfulness. It was the erosion of stories over generations, the fading of a shared history into myth, and the decay of a bond that required attention to thrive. This kind of conflict cannot be resolved with force. It demands a different kind of courage, the courage to be vulnerable, to listen, and to extend a hand across a chasm of centuries. Elara's victory was the restoration of a bridge that had nearly crumbled to dust. She became the arch that connected two worlds, allowing the flow of magic and mutual respect to begin anew. The peace she now enjoyed was the direct result of that mending, a testament to the power of empathy over conquest. The survival of magic itself had hung in the balance, a concept so vast it was difficult to fully grasp, yet its proof was now in the simplest of details. It was in the way the herbs in the garden seemed to grow with more potency and vibrance, their leaves shimmering with a faint, healthy light. It was in the clarity of the water from the well, tasting of mountain snow and something else, something clean and electric. The dragons, those magnificent creatures of legend, were no longer waning spirits, clinging to existence in a remote Aerie. They were a living, vibrant part of the world's rhythm, their restored fire warming the land in ways seen and unseen. A way of life for both humans and dragons, a symbiotic existence that offered prosperity and purpose to both, had been pulled back from the brink. This was the ultimate reward for facing the unknown with an open heart, a world healed and reconnected, its music once again whole. Elara's quiet life among the village herbs feels like a memory from another lifetime, yet it was the very preparation for the extraordinary destiny that found her. Her journey from tending ember globe plants to becoming the guardian of the eternal flame redefined not only her own existence, but the very fabric of her world. This rebirth of the Age of Dragons stands in beautiful contrast to the ancient tales of terror and fire, replacing them with a new era defined by cozy companionship and a shared, wondrous connection between all living things. The flame at the heart of the village, and indeed in the Great Aerie, now burns with a brilliance unseen for centuries, a powerful testament to two profound forces: the enduring power of remembrance and the transformative courage it takes to reach out and rebuild what was lost. Though her role as guardian promises many more adventures, this particular chapter of her story draws to a satisfying close, basking in a profound and well-earned contentment. The legacy of the flame, once on the verge of being extinguished forever, is now safely entrusted to the future. It lives not just in the magical fire itself, but in the pages of the book she fills, in the lessons she shares with the children, and in the budding potential of a young girl named Anya. The story concludes as it began, centered around warmth and light, but the scope of that light has expanded immeasurably. It no longer illuminates just a single village hearth, but an entire world, shining with a renewed sense of hope and possibility for all.
you.